Hope you like dogs because he's decided that he is in the video. Okay guys, today I wanted to talk about the symptoms that I had during the 2-week wait. Everyone knows that you need something to do during this 2-week wait to try to mitigate the absolute anxiety of the fact that you can do nothing to determine what's happening from here. Either you're pregnant or you're not and you don't know the answer. So I have written down the symptoms that I had during the 2-week wait when I ended up being pregnant. So I am going to assume that I know the date of ovulation, but I'm very aware that we don't know the exact date based on when I got a positive test. I think I thought I knew. However, then whenever they started dating the scan, it looked like it might have been 2 days earlier. So I'm gonna start with 3 DPO, but it is possible that it was 4 or 5 DPO whenever I started to have these symptoms. On 3 DPO, I actually started to have some symptoms that I think were attributed to the pregnancy. At the time, I thought that I was losing it or a little bit Looney Tunes to have noticed so early. I thought there was absolutely no way. It hadn't even implanted yet, but I did have an actual measurable symptom on that day, and that was increased heart rate. So if I go into my watch that I was wearing every single day for months prior to that day, starting on that exact day, my heart rate increased by like 20 beats per minute, and it never went down again until after I had the baby. So it's kind of crazy, but I actually did have symptoms from that. The pregnancy started to affect my body a whole week before I actually got a positive test and way before the baby even implanted. So I had the increased heart rate. On that exact same day, I started to develop dizziness. So I thought that it was probably because we had been walking all day that day in the heat because it was July. So I was like, well, probably I'm just a little bit dehydrated, but I really don't think so because I actually ended up having that symptom again the next day when we weren't walking around. Still could have been a little bit dehydrated, but the fact that it began on the exact day that my heart rate increased, I think that the dizziness was just attributed to the fact that my body realized something was going on and it needed to adjust the blood flow and things like that. So it was making me a little bit dizzy. I also noticed on 3 DPO that my breasts were sore. That is something that can be common for me in that wait between ovulation and my period, but I noted it just in case because I knew that it probably would get a little bit more sensitive if it turned out that I was pregnant. Okay, and then just to reiterate, on 4 DPO, I still had that dizziness again, kind of all day. Like anytime I moved my head, I was like, whoa, I just feel off. And then still noticed my heart rate was still increased, and I knew that that could be a sign of pregnancy, so I was a little bit suspicious at that point. Okay, this one is so embarrassing. 5 DPO, I was so emotional that I cried in the Paris airport. This is not like me. I never would do this. My husband was looking at me like I had 12 heads, but they told us that our flight home was full and that we couldn't get on it. And I wanted to go home so badly, I just started crying in the airport. And not gonna lie, I think that may be why we ended up getting on the flight, because I think that the French flight attendant was like, oh my God, get this crying American girl as far away from me as possible. It's just like quietly crying in a corner, and this random girl was trying to make me feel better. Yeah, so very embarrassed to admit that, but I was actually glad that I ended up pregnant because I was like, okay, well, at least I have an excuse for this, and it wasn't just that I'm a Looney Tune, so. So 6 DPO, I actually didn't write down anything, so I didn't feel weird pretty much at all. 7 DPO, I actually started to have a lot of symptoms. I was at work that day and I realized I was so hot, and I'm never hot. I'm always cold. I always wear a sweater or a jacket at work, and I did that just like normal, and I was like, oh my gosh, get this thing off of me, which was crazy because like I said, it was July, so the air condition was blasting that day, but I kept having hot flashes, and I was like, whew, okay, I have to go sit down for a second. I also was more forgetful, I felt like, and I wasn't sure if that was just because it was my first day back at work after vacation, but I just noticed that I kept being like, oh yeah, I forgot I was gonna go do that, or oh, what was this? I'm not sure. So did notice that. Also, I was having insomnia. I originally just attributed that to the fact that we were going back from a different time zone. We had been in Europe, and so we were 6 hours behind. But my husband was starting to adjust normally, and I was still waking up every single morning at like 3:30 or 4 a.m. just wide awake. Again, at the time, I was like, well, I'll write it down, but definitely I'm just having a harder time adjusting. But no, that insomnia stuck around for probably at least the entire first trimester. I would wake up at 4 a.m. every single day, just wired, ready to go. So that was actually a symptom. Okay, and then lastly on 7-DPO, while I was walking my dog that evening, I got a random sharp right-sided pain. Could have been an implantation pain, also could have been around ligament pain. It could possibly be that early, that things were kind of starting to shift. My body was maybe producing a little bit of relaxin, and so I was having some irritation. Again, could have been a fluke, but I definitely think something was going on because I had those pains off and on for a few weeks and then later in the pregnancy as well. Okay, 8-DPO, I wrote down that I noticed I had some acne starting to pop up. And then also that when I was standing for a long period of time, I got really hot and I had to sit down because I felt a little bit faint. And then again, the insomnia. Also wrote that down because I was not a fan of that. On 9-DPO, I didn't write down any symptoms, didn't have any symptoms. I took a pregnancy test and it was negative. Very, very negative, not even the slightest faint line. Then 10-DPO, I didn't write down any symptoms at all, but that morning with my first morning urine, I got a positive pregnancy test. I was floored. I took 2 immediately, and then I don't know how people wait to tell their partners because I just immediately ran out into the kitchen with holding the tests like this. Like, what do we do? They're positive. So that is all of the symptoms that I had during my 2-week wait that did end up in a positive pregnancy test. Leave a comment below and let me know what some of your symptoms were, because I'm genuinely curious to know if other people felt similar things like I did, or if you didn't have any symptoms at all. Obviously, I knew that we were trying to have a baby, so I was paying more attention to some of these symptoms. I think probably the only thing I would have noticed if I wasn't paying attention because I was trying would be the dizziness, because that was pretty difficult to ignore. It was there every single time I tried to move. And some of the hot flashes, I probably would have noticed that as well. However, I also think that I would have just been like, oh, I just need to drink more water. So nothing like obvious that would have let me know that there was a pregnancy brewing. If you like videos like this, please like this video and subscribe. I have plenty more coming. If you have a request for a type of video that you would like, leave it in the comments and I would be happy to try to make that video for you. Anyway, thanks you so much for watching and I'll see you guys later.